Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new Pori revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, Revenge on My Abusive Mother. She never knew it was me responsible for the clink. This happened in 2004 when I was 14. A bit or backstory before I begin, my mother is not a good person. She was abusive verbally for most of my life until I was 14, when her abuse turned physical. Because of her abuse, I came up with creative ways to punish her in my own petty ways, like tampering with her food and dunking her toothbrush in the toilet every day. This story is of one of my better petty revenges towards her and the one that annoyed her the most. I talked to my friends about the things she did to me, and although I appreciated the advice to go to the police, I knew that wouldn't work. My mother is very convincing when she wants to be, and every other time I went to the police, they never believed me. One of my friends, who we'll call Tom, gave me a brilliant idea that would annoy her to no end but wouldn't get me in trouble. His dad is a mechanic, so Tom knows his way around a car. After school that day I went with him to his house. He showed me a place underneath the car, between the top of the front wheel and the side of the engine, and told me what to do. Bring on the pettiness. I had to wait a few days to enact my revenge, but the day finally arrived. My mother and my sister left the house to ride their horses, which gave me plenty of time to do what needed to be done. The next day I went with my mum and sister to do grocery shopping, and I was elated to hear the product of my labor as the car started to drive down the driveway. Clink, clink, clink. Yes, dear readers. I attached a rock to the end of string inside the car that made a loud clink sound every few seconds when the car was moving. Mum, what the heck is that? Me, no idea. Maybe you should get the mechanic to have a look at it. Remember how I said that Tom's dad is a mechanic? Well, he's the only mechanic in the town we lived at, and Tom made sure to tell his dad about the things my mother did to me. Needless to say, he was on my side. So after we'd done our shopping we stopped at the mechanic so they could look at it and fix whatever needed fixing. Mum, as we arrived at the mechanic, hi there. Well, my car is making a weird noise when I'm driving. Can you look at it for me? Mechanic, sure thing. How about you take a seat inside and I'll give it a drive and see what the problem is. He got in the car and drove it around the block. When he returned, the noise had, miraculously, stopped. He charged my mum for the check and we were on our way, but not before Tom's dad subtly handed me the rock back and gave me a wink and a smile as I left. That night, I put the rock back in place and left it to do its thing for the next day, and oh boy was this satisfying. The next day the noise was back, so Mum went back to the mechanic, but this time the mechanic couldn't find anything wrong with it and couldn't hear any noise. I never bothered taking the rock out after that, and neither did the mechanic. He'd experienced her entitlement firsthand and had heard many stories from other people around town about her. The rock wasn't damaging the car or affecting its performance, so there was nothing that needed fixing. I moved away to live with my dad when I was 16, but before I moved, the clink was still there, tormenting my mother every time she drove the car. I lost count of number of times she took it back to the mechanic and the amount of money she spent on getting rid of the clink. The last time I saw my mother I was 23 and she still has the same car. I'd expected the rock to have fallen out by then, but the car still has a clink, but not as loud. Thanks, Tom. The next one is titled, Tell Everyone I'm Sick. Not my story, it's my mum's as she told it to me over the course of it happening. All came to a head in 2012-13. Hang in there, it's a long one. Characters: Mum, my mum Sharon, nice manager Kyle, bad manager Karen, store manager. Backstory: Mum started working in a supermarket when I was a baby because her previous work couldn't give her part-time hours after I was born and her maternity time ended. It was good enough, hard work, average pay, but really great co-workers and managers. She stayed for many years, eventually working in the in-store cake shop, and got trained to be a manager in the cake shop. When the old cake shop manager left, she was told she would be promoted. So she took over all the duties, writing rotas, schedules, checking stock, filling orders and sorting them as they came in. Anyone who's read posts on this thread probably knows what happened next. They never promoted her. So she took on all those responsibilities, on top of standard prepping, cooking and decorating cakes and pastries, packing it all up, putting it on the shelves and keeping the department clean. She didn't get any extra pay. She was meant to get something like a £3 per hour raise, and was working close to 60 or 70-hour weeks. For years. I was just a kid, so I never really noticed anything other than, oh, Mum's at work. Then things changed. The store manager Karen and another manager Sharon announced that a new manager was coming in, who would be Mum's direct supervisor. She's like, okay, no problem. New guy, Kyle, arrives and starts getting to know everyone. Eventually, all the work starts getting to Mum, and she sees her doctor, who sends her to a therapist, who diagnoses her with stress and anxiety. She also had a lot of physical issues diagnosed, so she's generally not doing great. She starts medications, goes to therapy, and things start to improve. Now I'd like to mention that Mum went above and beyond for her job. She reorganized the entire cake shop fridge, freezer and kitchen to make things completely organized. She'd do all the monthly rotas about 2 to 3 months in advance. She helped other departments whenever they needed her. Basically never took a sick day. Well, her health, physical and mental, goes downhill due to some personal stuff, so the doctor signs her off work for stress and anxiety. She tells Sharon, who she's always reported to, who in turn tells Kyle since he's Mum's manager. Technically, they should be the only people in the company who know why Mum was signed off. Everyone else was just told Tina's taking some time off. Well, someone asks Kyle while they're both on the shop floor. Kyle tells her. By shouting it to her. At supermarket rush hour, surrounded by customers. Most of them know Mum personally, so this was a big thing. A woman Mum is friends without work messaged her, told her the whole thing. Mum was upset. Anyone who has met my mum knows how pleasant she is, and has never seen her angry. When she got to the store after hearing this, she was fuming. Went straight to Sharon, who was Kyle's manager, and reported the whole thing. Store manager Karen gets involved, while they listen to Mum going off about how her personal business was just shouted across the store, her mental illness. She got her doctor to sign her off for even longer, lodged an official work complaint against Kyle, started planning her revenge. The revenge, long story short, nothing happened to Kyle. Basically a slap on the wrist, don't tell people where you can be heard. Not don't tell people about your staff's mental health. Don't get caught. So Mum starts planning her revenge. As I said before, she did the rotas. She already had up to November finished, signed off and put up on the board. Which left December. She came back from her time off for all of a week. Went in on Monday, asked Karen and Sharon if they were sure they wanted to refuse to take proper action. As far as I've found in my working life, what Kyle did was a reason to fire him. Karen won't do anything, Sharon can't go above her. Mum says okay, gets on with her shift. On Friday, she asks again. Same answer. So Mum pulls out her notice, says she's quitting with 2 weeks left. But she's got a lot of holiday time left, which adds up to nearly 3 weeks. So she's done after her shift that day. Karen looks a little startled but doesn't know all the things Mum does for the company, so accepts the resignation. Big mistake. Later that day Sharon comes to find Mum, asks her if she's really leaving. Yeah, she is. Sharon knows she can't convince Mum, so she wishes her well and asks if she has anything lined up. She does, she's not stupid. New job starts in a month. When she clocks out, Kyle comes to ask her where the next rota is, since he needs to sign off on it by close of business that night. She smiles, tells him she doesn't work there anymore and explains that as the manager overseeing the cake shop, it's now his responsibility to create one. His face drops. He stutters as she leaves, never looking back. That's when crap hits the fan. Because guess when she left? 2 weeks before Christmas. For a supermarket cake shop, that's devastating. Nobody had put in new orders, nobody was organizing the fridges and freezers, nobody was prepared to suddenly receive 500 plus specially ordered desserts for Christmas. The department falls to pieces when the regional manager, who only showed up once a year for inspections, paid a surprise visit. He was horrified. Everyone blamed Kyle. Every single person. Even Sharon admitted that the reason everything went downhill was because of what Kyle did, then because of the stress of working with him, Mum quit. Kyle got fired. It took close to 2 years for the cake shop to get back to being half as good as it was when Mum was there. And she started a store-wide walkout, with nearly every experienced worker leaving and getting better jobs elsewhere for more money. And Mum? She's back in good health, at a job that pays roughly $20,000 extra every year and only has to work 40 hours a week. The next one is titled, Brother was a terrible house guest, so I exploited his phobia. I feel I should start by saying I really don't like my brother. He's younger, but has always been a jerk, leech, and general screw-up. He's the kind of guy who drinks all but a half ounce of the orange juice and puts the bottle back in the fridge, or takes someone else's lunch from the fridge at work. I've also never heard him say thank you, except as kids when he was forced to by our parents. Our parents did a generally good job of raising us. No abuse, no narcissism, no crazy church stuff. So it's all him. Last summer we were having some brutally hot, humid weather for our area, 90 degrees with 85% humidity at 9 p.m. sort of thing, and he knocked on my door, giving a sob story about how his car was broken down nearby and he needed a place to stay. If it were up to me, I'd have shut the door in his face. But my wife came to the door too, and since she's a better person than me, insisted we let him in. I acquiesced because I didn't want to deal with her in a grumpy mood. I cooked dinner, steak, with mashed potatoes and green beans. More than he deserved, and we made awkward small talk, him complaining about his current job, until I was able to end the conversation. We set him up in the guest room and headed off to sleep. He never thanked me or my wife for the shelter or the meal. I woke up the next morning around 7 to find him passed out on the floor downstairs in the area where my home theater is set up, a couple feet from a big pile of vomit on the carpet. And an empty bottle of scotch that I had purchased only a few days before and not opened yet. Lagavulin 16, to be specific, so not a cheap bottle. I'd bought it for myself as a celebration for getting an anniversary raise at work. The sight of my brother having finished an entire bottle of scotch and then puked it up on my carpet was not exactly what I wanted to see first thing on a Saturday morning. Then, because of the bastard I am, an idea struck me. My brother is terrified of thunder. Was as a kid, is still as a grown man. No real reason for it, it's just a phobia of his, like heights are for some people. There is a 3/4 bath downstairs with a door that swings outwards instead of inwards because the previous owner crammed everything into as small a space as possible. So I dragged my brother's sorry drunk ass into the bathroom and left him on the floor. Not being a total jerk, I grabbed a box of saltine crackers, a couple bottles of Gatorade, some aspirin, and a plastic cup for water and put them in there with him. Then I closed the door, and kicked 2 door wedges under it so he couldn't get out of the bathroom. Then I went and found some thunderstorm sounds and fired up my home theater system. It's nothing that would make the home theater subreddit jealous, but it's way more than a sound bar or basic home theater in a box. The subwoofer can make drinks on the table rattle. I fired up the thunderstorm sounds and cranked up the speakers. Then I went upstairs to make myself some coffee and breakfast. The floor vibrated with the synthetic storm in the basement, and my groggy wife was wondering why the hell it sounded like a storm when it was shaping up to be another scorcher. I told her what my brother had done. And what I had done. She looked furious and looked at the clock, which was at about 8:15, and said, "Leave that ungrateful little idiot in there until 10. After my coffee I went down to clean up the puke, and heard him sobbing and banging on the door. Yelling, "Duck you! Stop it!" and other nonsense. I yelled back, "Have some crackers and Gatorade," and turned up the speakers a bit. Not much, because I didn't want to damage my equipment. Around 10 a.m., I turned the thunderstorm off. I heard crying coming from the bathroom. I pulled out the wedges, opened the door, and saw my brother's pathetic butt curled up in the shower stall. I looked at him for a long time, until he looked up at me and started to say, "You son of a, shut the hell up and get out of my house." I cut over him, "You're never allowed to ask for my help again." Eyes still red, he slunk out of the house and got an Uber. I haven't heard from him since. I had to answer a couple of confused texts from my parents, but mild annoyance on their part was really the only fallout. The next one is titled, "Steal My Medication, I Make You Seriously Regret It." So when I was 15 I was diagnosed with bipolar schizophrenia. If you can keep your medication in balance you can live a perfect normal life. From the age of 15 to 20 was rather hard as we tried to find the right balance and medication for me. But it has been 11 years since I was first diagnosed and has been 6 years since I have any really bad symptoms. There have been a few minor issues when my meds would go out of balance. But nothing too extreme. Anyway, this happened 3 years ago. I had just moved into a new apartment with 2 new roommates. We will call them Zach and Rachel. Yes, those are their real name because duck them anyways due to my illness I take multiple medication. An antipsychotic, antidepressants and an anti-anxiety medication to name a few. These are all rather strong medication. So when I moved in and got settled in I started notice some of my meds start going missing. I have my pills counted out and ready. So I know exactly how many I have. I immediately suspect my roommates as they were the only one with access to my room. I also knew for a fact they took other medications to get high. They were pretty open about it. But I had no proof. And didn't want to risk upset them as I had to live with them. So I looked past it hoping it was a one-time thing. But it wasn't. After a few days of this I lost it and confronted them. They denied it and of course I had no proof. I even got a lock for my room. But somehow they still managed to get in. So here where the revenge starts. So due to all my medication I get constipated a lot. So I have a very strong laxative I take when this happens. They are tiny pinkish pills. If you don't know about medication you could easily mistake these for something else. One morning before heading to work I took my antipsychotic pill bottles and switched out the pills for my laxatives. And then I left. When I came home that evening, both my roommates were in the washrooms. I asked Rachel what was wrong. She made up some food poisoning excuse. They spent the whole night in and out of the bathrooms. My medication stop disappears after that night. The next one is titled, Mum Exposes Entitled Grandparents. I was told this story secondhand, but given what I know about the main players involved, I can definitely believe this happened. Here are the key players: Mum, the hero of the story; Dad, father entitled Grandma; Dad's mother entitled Grandpa; Dad's father, yeah, he's just as bad as entitled Grandma; cool Grandma; Mum's mum. What went down? The details are fuzzy on this part, but what I do know is that my mum got into an argument with my grandma over something so stupid Mum doesn't even remember what it was about. Anyways, entitled Grandma gets really mad and storms off. Next thing they know, Dad gets a call from his business from one of their workers. Entitled Grandpa, who works at the business as an employee, has been cussing about cool Grandma to anyone who will listen. Like using really angry, vulgar language. Mum and Dad eventually figure out it's related to the argument Mum and entitled Grandma had, and that she must have told my entitled Grandpa. Dad confronts his mum, and she swears to God she never said anything to my entitled Grandpa. Entitled Grandma says she didn't even talk to entitled Grandpa that day. The catch? At the time, my parents were paying the entitled grandparents' phone bill. Sensing something was up, Mum looked up the bill and, sure enough, entitled Grandma called entitled Grandpa minutes after she stormed out of the house. Entitled Grandma is a holier-than-thou Catholic. Dad was heartbroken because he realized she blatantly lied to him and brought religion into it when she swore to God. Mum was furious. Not because Grandma and Grandpa talked about her, but because entitled Grandpa spoke so horribly about cool Grandma, who wasn't even there. Cue the revenge. The next time the entire family gathered, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, you name it, my mum brought up the argument again. Both grandparents deny it, of course, and start getting defense. Mum then brings in her laptop with the phone bill information on it, and says to entitled Grandma, "You didn't talk to entitled Grandpa. You swore to God you didn't." Then what's this? From the recounting of the tale, Mum says entitled Grandma and entitled Grandpa had serious duck looks on their faces. Mum cut off their attempts to talk, calling them out on not just lying to their son, who completely backed up Mum, but for saying horrible things about cool Grandma. Mum then plants the laptop on the room's main table for everyone to see, and tells the room, first addressing my aunts and uncles, "Look at your mother, the liar." Everyone had a chance to look at it, and I don't think anyone tried to defend the entitled grandparents for their actions. Those two started apologizing. I love my mum. The next one is titled, School Bus Driver Gets Revenge. This was years ago, but I was a school bus driver with a really ornery, rowdy group of middle and high school children. Every day these kids would pull the emergency exit handles, which would cause the alarms to go off and force me to pull over. Then I would have to get up and check every single alarm handle until the alarm shut off. Problem was I couldn't catch who was doing it. Even finding kids at the seat with the alarm, I wouldn't know which one it was, and none of them would confess or rat their friends out. This went on for a while, where I would make kids in the seats with the alarm going off all sit up front for a week as a punishment, but the alarms kept going off. Then one day I had an idea. Before my route I took Vaseline and I wiped huge globs under the handle just out of eyesight. Under each and every alarm handle. So you couldn't see the massive amount of mucus-like substance, but if you touched it, like when you tried pulling it, you would feel it. Trap was set, but it was hot that day, so the viscosity of the Vaseline was much more mucus-like than I could have hoped for. The kids all piled onto the bus. Down the road we went when all of a sudden I hear a girl scream as the alarm goes off, "Oh my god, what is this? EEW." I smiled, pulled the bus over, got up from my seat and walked up to her and said to her, "Gotcha." She kept screaming, wanting to know what that snot-like substance was. I had her suspended from the bus for 2 weeks, and then the rest of the year she had to sit up front. For the rest of the year not once was the emergency alarm ever pulled again. I guess they were afraid of xenomorph mucus, lol. The last one is titled, Owner Threatens Lawyer So I Get His Business Shut Down. For 2 years, I worked at a local ice cream shop. It made good money, but I absolutely hated it because the owner and co-workers were so awful. In the middle of my second year working there, I got another job in retail and would work both. Retail job put schedules up early, so I'd just put in my availability for the creamery after that schedule came out. Labor Day weekend was coming up, and it was a busy day for both the creamery and store. Store put the schedule out early as usual, so I put down that I couldn't work at the creamery that day. A bunch of my co-workers did the same, for no reason other than to get drunk and party. I get a text from my boss saying if I don't come in that day I'll be in a lot of trouble. He doesn't listen when I say I'm at my other job. After a heated argument, I quit on the spot. In a way to vent how much I hated this place, I posted on my Finsta, fake Instagram, used as a place to vent or complain or share funny stuff about how much I hated this place and how I'm so glad I finally quit. Someone screenshotted this and sent it to the owner. I get a call from him threatening to get a lawyer about this for slander. Everyone knew this was a bullshit call and nothing ended up happening. Either way, I was really upset. Fast forward a few months, and I'm sitting at home thinking about that man and wondering what I could do to get back at him. I remember overhearing from one of my ex-coworkers that there was a bug on a cup, gross, and they served ice cream in it anyways. I filed a complaint with the health department. They got a surprise visit from the health inspector who, within minutes, shut down the creamery for the day. Turns out, they had a roach infestation. Along with 4 other health violations. Disgusting. My friend shared the health inspection on Facebook along with a long paragraph explaining how nasty it is, and it gets over 300 shares. They're back open now, but business truly is not the same, and they might have to close down because of the bad publicity it got. Thanks for listening.